Welcome back to the Adam Schefter Podcast as we head straight in to the teeth of the NFL hiring cycle and conference championship weekend. And to get us ready for conference championship weekend, we are going to be joined today by a man who is the former player for the Philadelphia Eagles, made one of the most famous plays in the history of their franchise, the former head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, and the man who recruited Jayden Daniels to Arizona State and still has a close relationship with him. ESPN analyst Herm Edwards, the former Eagles cornerback, Chiefs head coach, and recruiter of Jayden Daniels, will come along to share his insights into conference championship weekend right here. But before we get to my friend Herm Edwards, we're going to be joined by the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show, a man who's in this spot every week, Ty Schmit, to quarterback this week's six-pack.
Thank you very much, Shefty. Another incredible week, huh? I mean, I feel like, we talked about this last week. Wild card round, it was great, but it did leave a little something to be desired. But then this past weekend's games, the divisional round was unbelievable. I was just in Atlanta for the national championship. That game was unbelievable. So just a remarkable weekend of football, and I couldn't be more excited for the conference championships.
Ty, before we go on to the six-pack, just give me a thought on your trip to Atlanta where Ohio State beat Notre Dame for the national championship.
I think it kind of went how everyone expected it to. Ohio State is just so talented. Notre Dame put up a hell of a fight. They did, for a little bit there. Ohio State marches right down and scores, after closing the half, and we're thinking, oh boy, this could be, 45-7 a rout before we know it. But Notre Dame had an opportunity there, a couple opportunities. Overall, I mean, one team, there's a reason that Ohio State was an 8.5-point favorite, and they kind of proved it. But you gotta tip your cap to Notre Dame. I mean, for someone who wasn't quite as, physically talented, a little bit undersized, they competed their asses off, and they had their moments. So overall, I think pretty excellent way to end the first ever 12-team playoff, and I think they got it right. I think the best team in the nation won.
Michigan wins the national championship last year. Ohio State wins it this year. We'll see who goes for it in 2026.
Absolutely. It's a Big Ten country. Everyone's just, playing for second place. There's a couple Big Ten alumna. I love that. But let's move on to the six-pack, Shefty. Topic number one, we mentioned it. This weekend's games were incredible. What is your, big takeaway, or what were you thinking about most after consuming all of these games in the divisional round?
I always like to look ahead when it comes to conference championship weekend, and I always like to envision what each of the potential Super Bowl matchups would look like, right? So if it were the Commanders and the Chiefs in New Orleans, we'd be looking at a matchup between Patrick Mahomes and Jayden Daniels, a man who is threatening to become the greatest quarterback of all time, with a guy who has burst onto the scene, two remarkable quarterbacks. That would be something. You get a lot of Jayden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes talk. If it's the Commanders and the Bills, we'd have a rematch of the January 1992 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 26, when Washington beat Buffalo 37-24. Mark Rippon was the quarterback. Gary Clark and Art Monk had field days at wide receiver, and Joe Gibbs led Washington to its third Super Bowl championship. And I don't believe Washington has sniffed the title since that time. That was the last great memory. If we get the Eagles and Chiefs in Super Bowl 59, it would be a rematch of the Super Bowl from a couple of years ago, February 2023, when the Chiefs beat the Eagles 38-35 in a great game in Arizona. Both teams up and down the field, Mahomes magic late in the game, a Super Bowl rematch, and everybody would sign up for that game right now. And then the last game that I think would be really interesting would be the Eagles and the Bills. Can you imagine the Eagles and the Bills? Now, the Bills have lost 4 Super Bowls. They've lost to the Giants, the Washington franchise, and the Cowboys twice. The Eagles are the only NFC East team that Buffalo never has lost a Super Bowl against. And Buffalo would have a chance to win that game. The two teams met in November of 23 in Philadelphia, went to overtime. The Eagles beat the Bills 37-34 at the Link. We'll see if the two sides can meet again, but it's going to be one of those four matchups. Commanders, Chiefs, Commanders, Bills, Eagles, Chiefs, or Eagles, Bills. Which one of those you like, Ty?
It's tough to say because I think if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have been kind of like, I don't really want, the Commanders are a fun story, but I don't really want to see them in the Super Bowl necessarily. After the last 2 weeks, I really do. I mean, I'd love to see Eagles, Bills. I'd love to see Eagles, Chiefs, but I really do. I think Commanders, Bills just sounds so intriguing. It does.
I agree with that. That would be unbelievable, right?
I think so. And Jayden Daniels, for what he's done thus far in the postseason, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that he's not already a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. His poise, the more I watch the Commanders, and same with the Bills, it's really hard not to like the Bills, not to root for Josh Allen and Sean McDermott and all those guys, especially all the narratives about them coming into the season. They lost all these guys, their window's closed, they can't do it anymore, and they just continue to find ways to win. So I think if you ask me right now, I think I do want to see Commanders Bills. For some reason, that just sounds very, very entertaining to me.
I'll say this to you. On Sunday, we were taping a segment outside for Sunday Countdown. We walked inside. Mike Greenberg goes to me, "Who's going to win the game between Buffalo and Baltimore?" I said, "Buffalo." He said, "You're the only one. Everybody here thinks Baltimore. Why do you think Buffalo?" It just feels like Buffalo to me. And listen, you got to be an idiot picking against the Chiefs. They embarrass everybody and find a way to win every single time. And I may eat these words, but it just feels like Buffaloes do. Like Buffaloes do. We'll see if the Bills can get it done on Sunday. The Chiefs are as formidable as it gets. They're going for the three-peat. They're at home. They got every advantage. We'll see how it plays out. But Buffalo, I don't know. And by the way, the Commanders are a dangerous team. They remind me a little bit of the 2007 Giants that got on a roll in the postseason and then upset New England in the Super Bowl. They're a dangerous team, and we'll get to Jayden Daniels later in the six-pack.
Absolutely, and they've already beat Philadelphia, and they're it's a familiar opponent. So hey, you play a third time in a season, anything can happen. So yeah, well, that I'll be very excited to see how that one shakes out. Let's move on to topic number 2 of the six-pack, Shefty, and the team that the Commanders beat, but not just the Lions. Let's talk about the NFC North as a whole. All season long, we were saying, hey, this might be the best division in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And then some way, somehow, they flame out in the playoffs, go 0-3. No one wins a game. What happened to the NFC North? As a Packers fan, I'm sitting here just dazed and confused as to what happened.
But that's the amazing thing, that for all the talk that division generated, didn't win a playoff game. And now we've got 2 NFC East teams in the conference championship game. Who would have thought that would have been the case? Nobody. Everybody was waiting for the Lions, the Vikings, the Packers. Think about all the talk that the Lions and Vikings in the final regular season game generated for the number 1 seed. Neither one won a game. Neither one advanced. Here we are with the Eagles and the Commanders. Just unfortunate. You know what happened? Jayden Daniels got in the way. Jalen Hurts got in the way. Couple of hot teams. Couple of teams that really were on it. And again, that's we saw it in college football. The teams on the bye did not necessarily, it was not necessarily an advantage to them. And I think it was similar in football. By the way, Kansas City was there to be beaten on Saturday by Houston. Houston just couldn't take advantage of it. The Lions got beat by a team that already had won in the postseason in Tampa the week before and had gotten a little bit of momentum, and the Lions couldn't keep up with the Commanders. Nobody thought that was going to be the case. So I think part of it is these teams had a bye. The Packers struggled at the end. The Vikings didn't bounce back from the loss. It just was a whole confluence of factors. But the fact of the matter is, for all the talk that the division generated, it didn't come through, and it mattered in the end. And the NFC East did. And so the NFC East right now, it's the best division, despite all the theories and thoughts that occurred during the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And even as a Packers fan, man, I just feel so bad for Lions fans because if you'd asked them today, like you're absolutely right. After that big win in week 18 against the Vikings, I'm sure that they would have liked to turn around. I mean, I understand how beat up and how injured they are. So if any team needed the bye, it was probably them. But they were rolling. They were rolling. It was one of those things where if they would have played right after that, who knows what happens.
Back in 1996, when I covered the Broncos boat raced the entire NFL to the number one seed. They had a game in the first round against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and everybody was ready to punch Denver's ticket to the Super Bowl. And I distinctly remember the Broncos took a 12-0 lead in that game, I believe. And I'm at one end of the press box in the old Mile High Stadium, and I pick up the phone and I call Jim Sacamano, the Broncos vice president. I say, Jim, this is going exactly how I thought. And he said, why would you call me and say that? And from that point on, Jacksonville rolled them. I've never once called any team official during the course of that game after that phone conversation. And that day, Mark Brunell led Jacksonville to a win over the Denver Broncos, a huge upset win. You know who the quarterback coach of the Detroit Lions is? The same Mark Brunell. Mark Brunell feels now exactly what the city of Denver felt in 1996 when a number one seed loses in an unexpected way. And that's what happened. And those are the losses that stay with a city, a franchise forever. It doesn't erase the great season that Detroit had, but they always will think of the great season that the Lions had with the postseason loss that they had against the Commanders.
And there's that perspective flip when you're a fan of a team like the Lions who are just perennial losers, but then you go 15-2 and it stops being, when the Lions get in the playoffs, I want them to win a playoff game, because in the media, we talked about it all year. Hey, this is the most talented team in the NFL. This is the team that should win the Super Bowl. So you start thinking to yourself, like, well, no, this isn't just hey, let's get into the divisional round and make it to an NFC championship. This is our year to win the Super Bowl, especially when you consider everything else that's going on in Detroit. Speaking of which, let's move on to topic number 3 of the six-pack, Shefty. We've been saying for weeks now, hey, there's a good chance the Lions are going to lose both coordinators after this run. You hit the nail on the head last week on Pat's show, or maybe it was this week.
Last week.
Yeah, last week. Okay. All that, kind of smoke and fire had been heating up. Hey, Ben Johnson and the Raiders are a done deal. And you said, hey, not so quick. Why are we discounting the Bears? Well, will and behold, Ben Johnson's officially named the Bears head coach yesterday. And what do we think about that whole situation? I mean, this certainly does seem like we prepared for it. We talked about it, but now it's here. It's happening. The Lions are potentially going to lose, 2 hotshot coordinators.
Well, we're taping this Tuesday morning. Ben Johnson has been hired as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Aaron Glenn is leaving Detroit. He's taking a head coaching job. We think it'll be with the Jets, but the Saints still are making a push, and we'll see if they can get something done. Don't know how that's going to go yet. And in these things, you never know until it's done. So we'll see how that plays out. But the fact of the matter is, Ben Johnson's gone, and Aaron Glenn is also going to be gone. So the Lions are going to have to replace both coordinators. Now, the interesting part about this is that when a coach leaves and goes in division, everybody says it's going to be fine, healthy respect. We know what he can do. He knows what we can do. We're all friends. Those relationships are going to be challenged, because what's going to happen is Ben Johnson's going to go to Chicago, and inevitably some of the free agents that he's going to be drawn to are going to have connections to Detroit. And I've seen in this league coaches leave to go to other teams and other conferences and sign players, and that affect relationships they've had. I've had other teams talk about where they've seen it in their own division. I'm not even going to name teams where GMs have left and gone and become GMs within the division, and the relationships never were the same. So everybody's going to say how they respect each other and they're going to get along. It's going to challenge everybody, because Ben Johnson knows that team better than anybody, and they know Ben Johnson better than anybody. And these are old rivals. And now the old rivals are bringing in different voices and different perspectives, and it's going to impact them. And Ben Johnson made the choice that he had to make. As we talked about last week on the show, for all the people who said he was going to the Raiders, this is not personal. I know people felt like I was ragging on the Raiders. I saw some comments. I'm a Raider hater for my days of covering the. Let me be very clear. I could care less. Okay, it's absurd. I have a lot of friends with the Raiders. I've seen a lot of people enjoy great moments, and I'm happy for them. We don't root for teams or against. We root for people, and there are a lot of people with the Raiders organization that I've had great relationships with over the years. I have zero against the Raiders. So when I said last week that Ben Johnson, it didn't make sense, the Raiders, that's just uncommon sense. Let's keep in mind, a year ago, Ben Johnson could have interviewed for the Washington Commanders job, very possibly could have had the job if he wanted it, and he turned it down. A year before, he turned down a job or jobs, head coaching jobs. But let's go back to last year for a moment, because if he had the opportunity to go coach Jayden Daniels in Washington and he turned his back on that, does it make sense to you a year later to go take a job with a franchise that doesn't have a quarterback, that isn't positioned in the draft to get one of the top quarterbacks, that's in a division with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton? Does that make sense to you, common sense wise?
No, not at all. That's what when it was being brought up, and they talked about the connection with Brady. It's like, yeah, I understand Brady knows how to win. He's the greatest player of all time, but he's not playing quarterback, and he's never been an owner before. So
and he's not even going to be in the building every day.
Exactly.
So you're casting again. That has nothing to do with any alleged feelings that are completely made up that I have for the Raiders. That's common sense. That is to go from saying no to Jayden Daniels to taking that job. That is career suicide.
Yep.
That is absurd. So Chicago had arguably the most talented quarterback. Look, every one of these situations has its warts and flaws. Chicago's not a perfect situation, but it was the best one of the lot right now. And by the way, Caleb Williams' agent from the city of Chicago, which has nothing to do with it. He's going to send his guy to the best place, but he's there in Chicago, so the Bears could go over and meet with him and talk to him whenever they wanted. That may have happened once or twice in the last week or two. That may have happened. And so Jacksonville, with all due respect, some really good players. The alignment, the organization wasn't aligned the way that I think some people would like it to be. The Raiders were in the spot they were. The Bears have Caleb Williams, have the history, and again, have warts and flaws, but made more sense. And then they stepped up in the end. They stepped up. So when all these things work together and come together, that's the one that happens. And that's why Ben Johnson is in Chicago. And by the way, the idea that he could have gone back to Detroit is absurd. Okay? Let me explain why. He had turned down head coaching opportunities in 2 previous years. If you turn it down in a 3rd straight year, and I don't know what he was making as a coordinator, but let's call it $3 million a year. Okay? And you're turning down the opportunity to make $11, $12, $13 million. You're bypassing $10 million a year, and you're saying no again to another head coaching cycle. How many times do you have to tell teams no before they stop calling? You can't risk 30, 40, $50 million in a 3rd year and hope the Lions are that good again next year and you're that hot for a 4th straight year. The idea that he could go back to Detroit is nonsensical. It was never an option. He was going to be a head coach this year, period. And he decided to do it in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's married or anything like that, but
he is.
Okay, so,
children.
Yeah, exactly. Your wife, are you turning down $10 million? Okay, well, you might be getting served some papers or something like that, or, you might be sleeping on the couch for the next 8 months if you don't jump on that opportunity.
And by the way, there have been coaches who have turned down head coaching opportunities and GMs who have turned down GM opportunities. They don't come around every year. They're not automatic. So when your name is hot and when you have that opportunity, you better act on it. And that's exactly what he did. He did the right, responsible, smart thing this year, unlike other years.
And you mentioned it. The Bears, say what you want about the Bears. Talent wise, I mean, going into this year, people were saying they were a playoff team. Hey, this is the best team ever to have the first overall pick in the draft. He revitalized Jared Goff's career, plain and simple. He just did. And if he goes to Las Vegas, we've seen what Mark Davis does. If they go 4-13 2 years in a row, who's to say that it's not? You know what? We made a mistake. Let's get rid of this guy. Let's cut bait. We'll find someone else. If he makes Caleb Williams look like the guy everyone thinks he's going to be, I don't think they need to go to the playoffs. I think if they win 7 games next year, but if Caleb Williams takes another step, it's like, okay, yep, we made the right choice. We'll ride this until the wheels fall off. So I agree with you completely. The Raiders piece of it never made any sense to me, really. The connection with Brady, I get it, but he's not a 14-year-old Patriots fan. He's an adult who's married and has kids and is looking out for the rest of his career. So we'll see what happens with Ben Johnson. If anything that we've seen in the last several years, at the very least, we think that offense will be very, very good. So that should be fun to watch. Let's move on to topic number 4 of the six pack, Shefty. With all this moving around, there's still kind of one team that's left out in the lurch, and we still haven't really heard very much about it. It's really cooled off since last week. Where does all of this movement leave Dallas?
It's interesting. On Sunday Countdown, we did a coaching summary, coaching carousel look. And when I was talking about it with the producers and we were trying to figure out the best way of laying out this segment, I said, really, there are 5 openings at that time, 5 teams with openings, and then there's the Dallas Cowboys. And the 5 teams with the openings all have some interest in similar guys. Everybody's interested in Ben Johnson. Everybody's interested in Aaron Glenn. Some of these other guys are interesting, like the Bills offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, or Liam Cohen, or Brian Flores. And the Dallas Cowboys collection of candidates is different than every other team. Every one of the guys that the Cowboys is looking at basically aren't on the list of other teams, with the exception of Kellen Moore, who might just be the leading guy for the Dallas job. So we looked at Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn and said, they're taking jobs this week. It'll be done very quickly. And of course it was. And then we have the Dallas Cowboys. You've got Kellen Moore. You've got Robert Saleh, who they interviewed. You've got Leslie Frazier, who they interviewed. You've got lurking in the background Deion Sanders, Jason Witten, maybe Anthony Lynn, the run game coordinator in Washington. Brian Schottenheimer has been brought up. And look, Jerry Jones always can do what he wants. They love Brian Schottenheimer. I have a great respect for him. But I don't think they're viewing him as a head coach right now. I think he's viewed as an offensive coordinator candidate. We'll see how it plays out. And now, as we tape this Tuesday morning early, we'll wait to see where Dallas goes with this. I would think by the end of this week, most of these jobs will be filled. And Dallas would like to get something done, but if it's Kellen Moore, obviously it can't even get anything done until the Eagles season is over. So we'll see. Dallas's search may go on longer than anybody's. It got a late start. Jerry Jones does his own thing, and in the end, he will do what he wants to do. We'll see where it goes. Those are the names we're looking at. They're by and large different than the names that other organizations are considering. Robert Saleh is on some lists. Kellen Moore is on some lists. I got it. But Dallas is going to get who it wants from that list. If it wants Kellen Moore, it's getting Kellen Moore. If it wants Robert Saleh, it'll get Robert Saleh. It'll get who it wants. And the Cowboys know that they're operating in their own universe, not really competing against anybody for who they want to hire as their head coach.
And that makes sense. You've said it from the get. Jerry's going to do what Jerry wants to do. Plain and simple. He marches to the beat of his own drum. I don't think he cares about what's happening around the league. And I don't know if he necessarily thought like a guy like Ben Johnson, they were ever going to be in play to get him. So,
Never.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably pretty easy to, kind of just ignore all this other. And at this point, honestly, nothing would surprise me. No name that I hear would surprise me. If they hired a high school coach, Jason Witten, I guess, would be that guy. A guy who's just won a couple state championships in the state of Texas. That wouldn't surprise me. If they got Deion, that wouldn't surprise me. Robert Saleh, sure. Honestly, nothing would surprise me because at the end of the day, I think it kind of is. When they're ready to make that hire, it's going to be we'll see how Jerry's feeling on that day. So, interesting situation in Dallas, for sure. Let's move on to topic number 5 of the six-pack, Shefty. Another just touchstone performance from Travis Kelce this weekend. everyone has something to say about, hey, he's getting long in the tooth. He's too slow. He doesn't have the same burst. He's not as good as he's used to be. And when they need him the most, he comes up and has his best game of the season. What is there to say about the greatness of Travis Kelce?
He's become arguably the most clutch postseason receiver that we've ever seen. I know Jerry Rice made a ton of plays, and I think of Jerry Rice automatically because of how incredible he was. But Travis Kelce is now the NFL's all-time leader in postseason games with over 100 receiving yards. He's got 9 of them. 9 games in the playoffs when everything's on the line where he's had over 100 yards in that particular game. And the amazing thing is, it's not like the Chiefs have these great receivers. It's not like we don't know that Travis Kelce isn't the primary option. It's not like we don't know that he's Patrick Mahomes' security blanket, that whenever Mahomes has any issues, he's going to look to Kelce. And yet Kelce has 9 games, a record 9 games of over 100 receiving yards in the playoffs. Look, there have been some incredible tight ends. I covered Shannon Sharp. He was unbelievable as a player. Tony Gonzalez came along and set a lot of his marks. I don't think there's ever been a more productive, great tight end than Travis Kelce. He may go down as the greatest tight end in NFL history. Gronk also up there. I don't know. Would you take Gronk or would you take Kelce?
And it's tough to say because those Patriots teams were so good, and Gronk was just, I mean, it's like, imagine if Travis Kelce had Randy Moss flanked out. It just, I feel like you mentioned, the Chiefs are kind of just piecemeal with their receivers, and the one constant has always been, hey, Kelce's there, and he's going to open everything up for everybody. So, I mean, that's tough to say.
I think Gronk at his peak may have been better. Injuries derailed that, but the sustained greatness of Kelce is undeniable, and it becomes an interesting debate. Those two guys have, I think, passed the field. They've lapped everybody, and they're in their own category, and we could debate who the greatest tight end is, but Kelce now has built upon his record postseason, and it's still going. And by the way, you wonder, like, is this going to be it for him? I think it's also fair to wonder that. Like, how many more times is he going to play? How many more seasons is he going to go at it? Does he need to do this anymore? And is this his last ride, his last dance? We'll see how that goes. And by the way, I know Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez would like a word on our tight end debate, but I'm going to stick with Gronk and Kelce. Gronk for the peak of his career, Kelce for his sustained greatness.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I mean, I think the thing that's so remarkable about him too is he always just seems to raise the level of his game when it matters the most. I mean, people were talking all year, to your point, about, hey, is this it? Is he going to retire? Like, he's very clearly not the same guy he was 3 years ago. It doesn't matter. Playoffs come around.
When it matters, he matters.
He's good for 100 and a touchdown, no matter what. And he's opening everything else up for everybody. His competitive fire, though, I just can't see. Would it be a Cinderella story if they win a Super Bowl, they three-peat, go out on top? Sure. He just doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. I just feel like if he's got anything left in the tank, because the relationship he has with Mahomes, too, those guys are so close. They know how much they mean to each other in terms of their career. It'd be very weird to open up next NFL season and Travis Kelce not to be on the Chiefs. But I guess we'll find out. Let's move on to the sixth and final topic of this week's Six Pack Shefty. We talked about it at the top of the show. This guy is unbelievable. He's nails. It's hard to believe that he's a rookie, but he is. He's had arguably the best postseason ever for a rookie. What stands out the most to you about Jayden Daniels?
That it is the greatest postseason we've ever seen for a rookie quarterback. 2 straight road games. 0 turnovers. 0. Hasn't thrown a pick in tight situations. Hasn't lost a fumble the way that other quarterbacks have. He's been lights out. And when we look at these other quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks to start in conference championship games, they've had great defenses, right? Brock Purdy had a great defense. Mark Sanchez for the Jets had a great defense. Joe Flacco had a great defense. Ben Roethlisberger had a great These guys had great defenses. I wouldn't say the Commanders, with all due respect, have a great defense. They have a solid defense. It's decent. But Jayden Daniels has elevated the performance of the entire team. He's doing things we've never seen. He's become clutch more so than just about any quarterback in the league. He had 6 games this year that he pulled out in the final 10 seconds of the game. 6 as a rookie quarterback. And by the way, the Commanders last year had the second worst record in all of football. As somebody in the Washington organization said to me last week, he covers up a lot of our sins. That's what they said. And he does. He covers up a lot of their sins. He's elevated the play. He's changed the conversation in this postseason. And that to me is the most interesting part of Sunday's game against the Eagles. Can he change that conversation for another couple of weeks till Super Bowl 59? And can he change it going forward forevermore?